Thank you all so much for coming. My name's Emily. I'm the Adult Program Coordinator here. And I just want to say that we are so honored to have John Burroughs with us. It's been a pleasure to get to know him. We've had lunch a couple times. We go way back. So John, he loves his cats, so if you're a cat person, maybe you'll relate to him a little bit. And he is here to talk about his incredible experience from 1980. So he's coming up on his 45-year anniversary. So this is Mr. John Burroughs.
Can you just say,
Yeah, you coming next and I'll...
okay, all right. Okay. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How many people know about the Rendlesham incident at all? Quite a few. No, some don't, some, all right. Well, gotta see this came from there. All right, so it's coming up on 45 years. It all started Christmas night, December 25th, 1980. Okay? So, the book that'll be available today, if you're interested in it, is a science fiction view of what happened from that point going forward to today. So, but what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the incident itself, what we experienced, what took place, all the people that showed up in my life in the government afterwards, and everything else, and kind of lay out how many people believe UFOs are biological beings in a hard craft. Okay, so you're not open to any other possibilities, or is that kind of what you feel is what they are?
John, I think they're both mechanical and biological.
I'm open to anything.
I'm open to anything.
Okay. Because honestly, how many people have been following this more closely since 2017? Does everybody know what 2017 was? That was when the New York Times broke an article. I think it was on a Saturday morning it dropped, and they talked about how the government's hiding secrets about UFOs, different people that were involved inside government that were working on this technology. Does anybody remember that? Okay. So once that happened in 2017, everything's kind of changed with what UFOs, they now call it UAPs. Does everybody remember when that became famous besides its 2017 article? Hillary Clinton talked about it on a night show where she said we now call them UAPs. Okay, so the difference between a UAP is what they're trying to tell you over a UFO. UFOs are more mechanical in nature. They're a craft with probably biological beings. UAPs are unidentified aerial phenomena, which are more of a light form, but the light form itself is probably what is the life itself. It's not only the light, but it's also the life form within the light. Okay, and that's the stuff I'm going to talk more about. I'm going to talk about how they're utilizing it, looking at it, to use it, obviously, which is what our government likes to do, is use it to control and wage war with. So they show a big interest in UAPs because it can advance technology. In fact, anybody seen the new movie that just came out? I think it was Age of Disclosure or whatever it's called, just came out. Okay. One of the scientists in there said this is the race going forward with the nuclear. It's been about 100 years. Whoever grasps this technology the best will control the next 100 years. That's how important this technology is. All right, go ahead and do next. Okay, I'm John Burroughs, Tech Sergeant, retired. I did 27 years. Okay, so I'm going to just go a little bit over here to see it. All right, basically I'm going to talk a little bit about my encounter, the struggles to get information from the government, my medical records, which are still classified today, and basically, based on what happened at Rendlesham Forest, it's a de facto admit by the government that UAPs are real. Okay? Okay, anybody know who this guy is? Nick Pope? Nobody? That's kind of amazing. He's all over TV, all over running, we're talking about UFOs. He worked for the MOD. His father actually is more interesting than him as far as his father was actually involved in the technology having to do with UFOs and UAPs back in 1980. But he's talked a little bit about, as you said, he said he's going to record Rendlesham might be the turning point in history that leads to the explanation of the UFO phenomenon. Okay? Go ahead. Okay. This was the base I was stationed at in 1980. It was the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing in England. It was the largest TAC fighter wing at the time in the Air Force, and it was in Europe and the United Kingdom. And our mission at that time was, the A-10s, believe it or not, are still flying today, were brand new. And the mission was to counter the Soviet threat with tanks. So they didn't build as many tanks as the Soviets had, but this aircraft was supposed to help counter the tanks and stop the tanks, and it was just a tank in the air. That's just the air traffic control tower that was right down by the gate where the incident started. Okay, it started with, on the night of the incident, it was the 25th. We came on at 11, or 2300 military time, 11 p.m. civilian time. About 3 o'clock in the morning, myself and my partner and my supervisor were riding around doing checks when he saw strange lights in the sky above. I didn't see the lights in the sky, but he got my attention and I saw them going down into the forest. We left the base briefly to get a better idea before we notified anybody what was going on. It was outside the perimeter. Once we got off the base, we realized something didn't add up. We came back up, notified the desk, who transferred us to CSC. They sent down a security supervisor to verify what we were telling them. He saw the same thing with his rider. Eventually what they decided to do was, because they started making checks with the local radars, Heathrow Tower, RAPCON, was it Eastern Radar, and a couple other radars in the area to see if there was anything on radar during the time what we saw in the sky, and there actually was. Something went down into the forest about the time we saw it off of radar and disappeared. So they decided at that point they would go ahead and allow us to go off base to investigate. We were out in the middle of nowhere. You know, I don't know if any of you have ever been to England, but there's a lot of countryside, and a lot of the bases were put out in the middle of nowhere for a reason, for strategic points from World War II to bring aircraft in for crash landings, but also to keep them away from main population centers. Ben Waters Woodbridge was. What wasn't known about the base, we didn't even know it at the time, but there's two things that stand out. The incident itself has been called the British Roswell. And interesting enough, most of you know about Roswell, right, the UFO stuff, so they call it the British Roswell. But what most people don't know about the base was, and we didn't know at the time, right outside the back gate, that whole area is the British Area 51. That whole area goes way back in history. They developed all kinds of technology out there. They were working on lasers, which they then learned how to use, develop the radar systems. They were working on nuclear stuff back there. They had a facility out there that was actually supposedly shut down, but it wasn't totally, called Cobra Mist, which was the over-horizon radar. That whole area was very ripe for technology and everything else. It's called the Orford Nest, and you can look it up online where you'll see just how developed they were working on weapon systems. At that point, there was a facility, a joint American-British base that was being run under Marconi, which was the defense contractor at the time. And most people probably don't realize this, but SDI, most of you heard about it, were around at the time, that SDI didn't even start until after Reagan became president, right? This was actually being worked on back in the 70s. So SDI was being developed right there. They were working on the lasers, drones, satellites, and everything else right outside the back gate. So, and the last wild card to this is, around the world there are hot points where there is a UFO or UAP phenomenon. It's an energy field type of source. One of the areas is Rendlesham. Another area, I'm sure you've all heard of Skinwalker, right? That's another area. How many of you heard of Sedona? Okay, how many have been to Sedona? Anybody? You've been to, it's a weird place, isn't it?
Different.
Yeah, I lived there for 2 years. It's a bizarre place. So these are some, and then there's a place called the Marfa Lights. Then there's another place, and I think up in Finland they have a place where they looked at this. Now, one of the things they'll call UAPs is Earth lights, but it's definitely an energy force that they haven't told the public exactly what they know about it. Okay, like moving forward, a lot of people saw lights in the area around the base besides the military personnel. That's a picture of the gate after the base closed. It wasn't like that. Okay, I was involved in 2 different nights, okay? The first night I talked briefly about, and I'll go into more detail, and then there's actually 3 nights. Night 1 was when we saw it, went out and investigated it. Night 2, we went on break, that was our last midnight shift. So the new flight replaced us for midnight shift. They had an encounter to include an object that flew through one of the vehicles, disabled it, and the person in the vehicle got relieved of duty and sent home. And then night 3 was the night that another individual and I met up with the HALT team that was out there. He was actually with them. And Adrian and I went forward and we had an encounter with this UAP. We got really close to it. In fact, Adrian said it came over the top of me and I disappeared. Okay, this is from night 1. In the forest, in the area where we actually had the encounter, we went back out there in the morning, and there were 3 holes in a triangular shape that showed the area where we saw something sitting at the time. So there was some evidence showing it. That was part of the thing. When we went out there that night, we couldn't explain what we saw. So in the morning, we went back, turned in, and talked to the leadership. They sent us back out there. And a lot of us were like, well, what do we do with this? What do we do? When we went back out there and saw some evidence, the trees were damaged, there was some stuff on the ground, and then these triangular objects were there. That made it more real. Because at the point when we first had the encounter, you knew it was real, but you couldn't explain it, so it just kind of messed with your mind. Okay, there's just another picture of the triangular. Okay, so before I go into this, I'm going to a little bit about the 3 different nights. Okay, night 1, when we saw it, they said there was a 3-man team sent out there. I was one of the 3. So we got off base, we went into the forest, we got close to it, it seemed to go behind us, in front of us, it played with us. Finally, when we got to the area where we thought we were getting close to it again, there was like a berm, and as we went up, down, we went up over the berm, whatever it was sitting there right in front of us, which is where that picture shows the clearing where the triangle object was. Okay, at that point everything changes, which later I'll explain why it's possible. I just remember getting close to it, and then we hit the ground, and then it rised up, it took off and went back into the fields. The young airman that had just started this first night said, we got close to it, I drew my weapon, and it knocked us out. The other individual, which was the team leader, he's the one with the big story that's never been confirmed other than what he remembers, is he got up, walked around it, recorded stuff in his notebook, took pictures of it, touched it, got a binary download, and there were glyphs on it. So each one of us have a different, remember it differently on the first night, okay? Which can be explained partly by what we encountered. So whatever it was did eventually go back out into the field towards the coast. We chased it for a while longer, then it disappeared. Came back to the base. When we met back up with everybody, 2 things stand out. Number 1, our watches were 45 minutes slow. So when we went out there, all our watches were slow when we met back up, because we were like kind of confused and like, what time is it? We looked and they looked, and our watches were 45 minutes slow. The other thing was the people, there was a weapon storage area that was on the other base, but they could clearly see the forest where we were. They saw something come over the forest as we were going into it, and they felt like, well, they lost radio contact with us for over 45 minutes, and they thought at one point they saw something coming off the ground, going up into whatever this was. But the object wasn't a craft, it was more of a light type of plasma type of thing. Okay, night 2 was that I told you about the shift commander. They saw some stuff, had an encounter, and she got really busy. Night 3 was the night. How many have heard of the HALT memo, the news of the world and everything else? Well, what happened was it came back a 3rd night. So this is pretty rare, where you don't have something happen 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights in a row. They were having a party at the base, on the base at Woodbridge. The cops again saw something, and they notified the command. By now it was a big topic because this is night 3. So they decided to send a team out, and it was led by a lieutenant colonel by the name of Charles Hall. And he went out with the team. There's a tape online you can listen to. We didn't actually show the tape, did we? Did we show that at the beginning? Where it was supposed to come in with this little clip of the thing, maybe we
I
can.
think
I think he put it in the slides.
Okay, all right. So anyway, he actually recorded some of the encounter he had. Okay, so the tape actually is live, it's real, it's evidence that shows that they were out there, we were chasing stuff and stuff went on. And you can hear in his voice when it actually got close to him and it came at them and then a beam of light came down at their feet. And you can hear it, he describes it on the tape and everything else what was going on. Okay, so what he did afterwards was he put together a memo because we were not base, all this stuff was going on. So the official response was he put together a memo that got sent through the British liaison, because we were on the base was a NATO base, the Americans controlled it, but it was British, actually a British Air Force base. So they had a liaison there, but the Americans ran the base. So he wrote a memo through the British, it ended up going to the British, and it was filed. Well, a few years later, some people started talking about all this. Actually, right afterwards, it started leaking out. But eventually, it grew big enough that people started looking into it. They were able to get a FOIA out, and they got the memo released. So the memo came out, it's called the HALT memo. You can find that online. It'll be in here too. But it actually shook everything up. And this was the story that broke the news of the world in the United Kingdom. UFO lands in Suffolk, and that's official. Okay, that caused a problem. It caused a problem for the American Air Force, caused a problem for the British government, and it got the whole UFO world going crazy. They were hunting us down. Now, this is what I can't explain, because after the event, we were called in and told they were looking into it. They get back to us if they needed anything, but don't worry about it. It'll be kept quiet. Well, as you can see, it did get kept quiet. And no one to this day, even the colonel doesn't understand, because normally they don't respond to FOIAs or give out information, but some reason they actually released a FOIA through the FOIA request that something did happen. So that just added to everything, including this broke. We were chased down, hunted all over the place. People were calling us around the world. News agencies wanted to do things. There was a CNN special assignment report done through CNN that was done. It was a 4-part series. It was highly rated, talking about the event, what went on. So this became a big topic. And there was a reason why, because the military usually doesn't admit to any of this. But somehow they had a memo saying it happened. And the people were still alive, you know. They couldn't deny it happened with the memo. There it was. So they had a problem, okay? Right. These were the guys that were in charge at the time. The guy on the left was General Gabriel. He was in charge of all of Europe. He was a colonel at the time. Gordon Williams was the wing commander. The base commander was Colonel Conrad. That is Deputy Base Commander Colonel Hall went out into the field. And that was, the other guy on the right was the British liaison commander. And this is some of the things that they said. Go ahead. This is, Gabriel showed up. He didn't talk about it. All the information was taken. So he came in and took everything. All the reports, the blotters, everything was recorded through the command post. So all of our stuff that went on over those 3 nights, the command post recorded all the radio traffic. So everything having to do with the incident was immediately taken and classified. Okay, next. General Williams, he ended up being a 2-star, and he helped me get my settlement. But he just made this comment where basically he was saying he's open to the possibility advanced civilizations would have the technology to cut through time. So he himself, who was the guy in charge, made that statement. So we'll get into what that could possibly mean later. That was Colonel Conrad did an interview with Omni Magazine in 1983 and said, we definitely had something happen to us. We saw something, but he doesn't know what it is. Colonel Hall basically made this statement: the full truth were to come out, it would completely change the way people look at reality. So, again, it goes back to UAPs over a hardened craft. Okay? Now, that's the HALT memo that came out that he wrote. It's hard to read, but you can find it online. But basically what he did was he described what happened over a 3-night period. The dates aren't totally right, it's misleading, but that was done purposely to keep people from actually going back and looking at, when you have a hard date, you can go back and look at things differently than if you have the wrong date. But overall, it summarized what happened over a 3-night period, which became an official document, which supports the fact that this incident took place, which usually there's no evidence whatsoever when something happens. There's word of mouth, but there's an actual document that says it took place. Okay. And this was RF, the Moreland, the liaison for the British, said that it put the events down to an inexplicable phenomenon. So that's what a UAP is. Go on. All right, now, here's where it gets interesting, right? The event happened, they found out about it, they started reporting on it, things started coming out, they tried to make up things about how the lighthouse was the reason why, we saw stars in the skies, all kinds of excuses came out to cover it, right? But what happened to me was 30 years, which would have been, what, 19, it was 30 years, 2010, all right? We all got, some of us got together, we tried to put pieces together. I was doing some investigation, and the guy that was with me on night 1 and I went over to England. So we went over there to relive it, talk about it, and everything else. When I got back, I was sick. I got sick. It ended up being not what I thought it was, bronchitis or the flu. My heart was acting up more. Now, going back to my heart, I did have some issues right after the fact where I didn't feel well, ended up at Wright-Patterson. They did a thorough examination of me, realized my heart was damaged and my eyes I had a problem with my eyes and all this. So this was all documented by the government. They didn't tell me what caused it, they just evaluated me for not feeling well. One of the things that stands out that people have to understand, you couldn't get in the military with a heart issue. You just didn't let it happen. I didn't have a heart issue before I came in. I got the documentation to prove it. But I had the documentation to prove that when I got out of active duty in '88, I had a heart issue. So that was one of the problems they were going to have to try to cover. But basically what happened was, I had issues with my sight, my heart had problems, and my heart was starting to get really bad, okay? And they wanted to keep it hidden. So, let's see, what's the next slide? Go ahead. Go ahead, Warren. Okay, so now I'll go into the story. When I got sick, I was retired by then. So I was dealing with civilian doctors, the civilian world, health insurances and everything else. Well, the doctors couldn't figure out why my heart was acting up the way it was based on what they knew. So what they did was they requested that would the military give the testing they did on me back right after it happened. And that's when the problem started. They didn't want to cooperate. I had to bring a senator by the name of Kyle. Okay, all right. So I had to bring a senator by the name of Kyle, and I was trying to get access to my personnel records and my medical records. What ended up happening was the government came back and told the aide that was working for Kyle that my records weren't where they were supposed to. So she knew right away that meant they were classified. So she started digging harder, and eventually what had to happen was that I had to file for disability because that would force their hand to acknowledge what went on, as far as they'd have to come up with my records, they'd have to review my records and everything. But what ended up happening was that Kyle retired, so McCain got involved. And there was a big back and forth on my records. They refused to release my medical records. They gave up just a small portion of my personnel records. And all of them there was nothing there from 79 to 82. So what they were claiming was I wasn't in the Air Force in 1979. Okay, and we'll run through the slides in a minute, but I'll kind of tell the story. So they claimed I wasn't in from 79 to 82. They denied my disability claim. They claimed there was no records for me on file for medical or personnel. And they came up with this DD Form 214 that showed me in 82, but nothing in 79. So what we ended up having to do was we had to go around and do some inquiries, do some back source channeling, and eventually we were able to convince the government, who said I wasn't in, I was in 1979. Okay, but that still didn't matter. they weren't going to cooperate and give up any of my medical records to any doctor having to do any of them, but definitely they were hiding the records as far as what happened with my heart, what they knew about my heart and my eyes. Okay, so let's kind of go through these slides and I'll see if I'll kind of explain them. Okay, this is just showing, this came from the Department of Veterans Affairs, that they denied all my claims. And why? They denied the fact that anything I said was wrong with me wasn't possible and it had nothing to do with the military. Okay. So this was the DD form 214 that they used. This is what they claimed only existed. That I was in July, I was in 82. There was nothing in my records that was unclassified showing I was in between 79 and 82. Everything was out of my records. Anything I had to do with England, anything else was not there, never mind my medical records. Okay. Eventually we were able to get them to admit I was in 79. So they issued this DD form 214 and they admitted I was in 79. Okay. Now, what this is to sum up what happened. After they eventually admitted that I was in 79, they came back and told Senator McCain's aide to go ahead. I had an appeal already in through channels to appeal them my denial for all my medical stuff, my personnel stuff. And once we were able to get the actual proof that I was in 79, they came back and said, all right, well, now that we can't deny it was in 79, withdraw the appeal, and we'll reevaluate the case, and we'll most likely take care of it. So this was all in the works, and we did all this in May, and I told her at the time, I said, this isn't over, and she didn't believe me. She says, no, it's a done deal. Well, in July, I got a letter from the VA saying, thank you for denying your appeal, the case is closed. So as soon as I got that letter, I called her right on the phone, because by that time I had left Arizona and moved back here to Illinois. I called her up, and they were not giving them any information. It was all going directly to me. They were supposed to channel it through the senator's office, but they weren't. They were dealing with me, and that wasn't proper either. They also denied all our FOIA requests. We actually got proof that there was a classified record section, which doesn't just apply to my case, but to any incident that's ever been classified. Anything that happens inside the military that happens that's classified, a particular event, the records, both personnel records and medical, if they're injured or anything like that, will go into this section. So you don't have access. One of the misnomers, because I got told this over and over, was I have a right to my medical records. No, I don't. Okay? If you go in the military and you have something happen and they classify it, you no longer have any say or control over what they do with it. Okay, and that involves anything with the government that you're in. Anything that they deem classified, that means you don't have any say on how they handle and what they do. Okay, so we eventually, McCain got personally involved at that point, and he basically told them, based on all the information that we had given to them and different things that were going on behind backdoor channels, including Department of Justice was involved, was that either they do something with me or he would directly get involved and hold hearings on the whole event. Well, that shook some stuff up. So they didn't want that to happen. So they started cooperating as far as they brought somebody in, I don't know who this was, it was dealt by the aide, that had a clearance that was supposed to be able to look at some of what happened, have access to some of my records. Well, that person even told the aide that he didn't have the clearance to look at some of what was in my records and everything else. But they were able to eventually go through enough to actually, with McCain's heavyweight power and stuff, that they decided to award me a settlement. They decided to go ahead and treat me. I had surgery, everything else during this time frame. They decided to acknowledge I was in a 79, and they decided to go ahead and give me disability for my injuries. Okay, so the lawyer that I was working with, the civilian lawyer, was working with, wrote this, that the government actually admitted, by de facto, because of the fact you can't get a settlement from the government and the VA unless you were injured in the line of duty. You have to name where the event took place, and you have to name how the injuries pertain to the event. Well, the whole application we put in was involving our incident report system, the technology behind it, and everything else. So they admitted by de facto that UAPs are real, which is, right now, is the most evidence that the government technically has. They have a lot of people talking about what they saw, what they documents and all this other stuff, but myself and the other guy that was with me on I-3, Adrian Bastenza, who, when we were running towards the object, got knocked to the ground and then saw the object come over top of me and I disappeared, actually are the only two living people that are publicly known that have gotten compensated by the United States government for an incident that involved UAPs. So that's the only real true evidence that they have. All the other stuff that these guys are testifying for and all that, it's all hearsay. It doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean that some of this technology that they're talking about isn't real or what they've seen and what they've been involved with. It just means there's been no evidence presented. But what happened with us is actually real. We actually have the settlement documents that prove the government acknowledged we were injured by event. But the caveat to this is the government won't admit what we encountered or how we were injured. They just admit that we were injured during the event. So they're still even covering that up. And our medical records are still classified to this day. Okay. Now, a little bit about UAPs and stuff, what Einstein said, you know, you can't solve the same law, you know, that created it. So you can throw consciousness in, which is what UAPs are partly involved with. Okay. Now, here's a, you can read this, but there was a report that was partly declassified. It was done in 2006 by the British government. It's called Project Conduct, and it talks about UAPs. So they were very much into what a UAP was. There was obviously one right in their back door, right, sitting outside one of their top areas where they do weapons technology development and everything else, and they were actually studying UAPs. So they talk a little bit about what a UAP is and what it's capable of doing. Now, if you notice, most of the stuff that's been out recently, pictures and stuff, it doesn't show a craft or an object, it shows something moving. So, the interesting part about this is a UAP is partly used to create an effect on, if you had a craft, say it was one of ours, it can make the craft do something different. So it's like almost like a cloaking device, or protect it, and it can do some stuff because it's like interdimensional almost. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this was something they asked for, Edgar Mitchell said, one of his quotes. Okay. All right, now. I'm gonna read it. Okay, this is just a little bit more about what the government, the British government knows about UAPs and what it's capable of doing. Which, if you watch some of these videos, it's basically describing what the government studied and been looking at in these declassified documents. And part of these documents were partly used to get my settlement. Okay. All right. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. These guys, including this guy, go back, way back. They've been working on this stuff since the 70s, even the 60s. They all came into government, and this guy included. Anybody ever hear of MK Ultra? Okay. This guy was involved with MK Ultra. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about it is MK Ultra was in the 70s. It got exposed. Congress tried to get in the middle of it. They got denied. The CIA denied them access to it, and they claimed they destroyed all the documents. Partly what they did was they moved it all over to England. And it was all being still worked on outside the back gate, where we were at our base, that whole facility area. And they hide this stuff all the time that way. They move stuff around. Like, for example, I don't know if you've all heard of a recent thing that happened just recently where under Biden, he thought all the troops were withdrawn from Iraq and those areas because supposedly Trump actually ordered it, and they came back and they found out they were still there. Well, all they did was change it from operational to training. This is the games they played all the time. I was in the middle of all this. So that even the president and Congress, information is withheld from them all the time. They would make an order, they tell them to do something, and then they change the game plan, but the actual game is still being played. They just redo it, they move it around in different budgets, they do different things. And they've been doing this with UAPs and everything else for a long time. This guy's interesting, he goes back all the way into the 60s. He was probably involved in the whole incident. We have proof that he most likely was. His title, one of his things he does is he works with the government to evaluate injuries for people that have had encounters with UAP/UFOs. Okay, go ahead. Okay, now, after my settlement, and you guys can read this, but he actually came out and publicly made a statement, and take a minute to read it. But he basically talks about what he knows, the fact that I really was injured in this event, and exactly why I got my settlement. And he played a large part in this too, because he was putting pressure inside on the government that he was willing. He was actually going to come and testify, because one of the things that we were going to do was we were going to go to federal court and force the government to admit where my records were and why they were being withheld and what was the classification on them. So he came forward, did an evaluation of me, and then after, when I got my settlement, he made this statement. This is part of it. The rest of it should pop up on the next screen. Okay. So he basically says I was injured by a UAP, that they're real, they happen. He talked a little bit about why it injures us. How many have heard about, God, no, I'm having seen one. What is the thing that they've done, they talk about where it was Havana syndrome. Okay, Havana syndrome, that is equivalent to some of this. It's called frequency manipulation and stuff. It affects the mind, the body, and everything else. But he actually went public and admitted that this stuff was going on. Okay? Right. So, to sum it up, there are a lot of secrets out there that most of us aren't even aware of. I've gotten deeper into them because of my research, some of the people that have been around, and the incident itself. But ultimately, this is the real truth if you take the time to get rid of the infighting that goes on and everything else. The government is not run by elected officials. It's run by people behind the scenes that aren't elected. They're in positions in these different agencies and stuff. They have the final say and control over what we're working on or not. One of the things he talked about in that statement he made was, what happened to me was in SAP programs. Everybody know what an SAP program is? It's above top secret. It's called a special access program. They're real. In fact, they just made a statement the other day, some of the people in Congress, when they vote on these programs, they don't even know what they're voting on. They're just given a number. We have a program that needs $50 billion to continue to fund next year. And they have to vote yes or no. They have no idea what the program is, what's going on with it or anything else. Now, what happened in 2017 was some of these people in this group, and Green was one of them, they may or may not be being shut out, or there may be some other competition for this new exotic technology that they're working on, was the fact that they've let the public know. Has anybody here heard of Robert Bigelow?
Yeah.
You can go back and look at him. He's an aerospace guy out of Vegas. He was actually part of the 2017 revelation where Harry Reid gave him some money to study this. Mitchell was involved, some of these other people involved. He made a statement, and he did it on 60 Minutes. He says, there is intelligence here. It's among us. It's real. And he did an interview, he said, where what we're working on is confirmation, which means people need to understand something's taking place, something's going on, but we're not going to give you disclosure. Because it ties back to what Green said, it ties back to all these SAP programs, which has no oversight by any elected official, other than maybe a few within the Gang of Eight have some sniff of it if something comes up directly. But only the Gang of Eight have the clearance to even look at this. But they still don't have the ability to shut it down, nor do they, even if the president orders something. Have you noticed how like some of these files, like the Epstein and Kennedy, never gets released? It's partly because they have the final say. Whoever controls the project, whoever controls the documents, can or cannot decide to declassify them. Now, technically, Congress could come back and defund it, but most of the stuff, they're not gonna do that because of different reasons. But ultimately, these agencies control the final factors and everything, UAPs and everything else. Okay, so I got caught up in all this. The incident involves all this. This book that I've got available today is a science fiction book, but it talks about some of the involvement I had with these guys, some of the things that went on, some of the meanings that they told me or could mean and everything else. And then eventually here in the next few weeks, I'm gonna have another book called Crossing the Thresholds come out. And it's gonna lay out everything from the incident, what happened, the people involved and everything else. And the experiences I had, including goes into all my health issues and everything else. But all I can say is they're real, the government's aware of it, but don't hold your breath on when they're gonna ever tell us the truth. So, and there's a lot of military people that have had experiences, seen documents and stuff, and by no means am I discrediting any of that. The problem is, we just never have ever had a smoking gun where you could come out and say, here's a document that can't be refuted or poo-pooed or whatever. Or, unfortunately, most people believe the President of the United States is the one that's going to have to tell us what's going on, like it or not. So, anybody have any questions? Yes?
Hey, John, I don't question your experiences at all, but you talk about you disappeared into the light. When you fought back, who found you?
Actually, what happened was the guy that was with me that got the conversation too, it just went away. I phased out, came back, and there I was standing in the field in the I caught object, but the light went away. So, and I didn't really explain that. There's a thing called time dilation. Has anybody heard of that? Okay, it's a time dilation effect that this UAPs can create. That's partly why they're studying it. And it can be utilized in all kinds of things like stealth. How many people like Star Trek? Cloaking, that's what it is. They create a field around a craft that makes it disappear. But in reality, it is disappearing, but not the way most people think it is. It's slowing down or speeding up in time. So it's no longer in the same time frame that you and I are in. And that's partly why people that have these experiences have a hard time understanding or remembering afterwards. If you go into one of these or are affected by one of these, including what Condyne says, it affects what you remember, how you remember it, to include your mind can actually only comprehend what you can comprehend. So you, like they did this experiment, you can look online, it's called the God's Helmet. Okay, it was done out of Canada, and they wired it, people up with these pieces of equipment, and they put stimulation in their mind. The majority of the people, the reason why it's called the God's Helmet is they related to what they experienced was they saw God. Okay? So these frequencies can make you think you've seen things or relate to things that maybe aren't really real, to include what you actually saw. And then if you go into this time dilation effect, you remembered it from somewhere else, not where you come back to. Yes?
Did your friend have the same health problems?
He had some, and then he also had PTSD. Nightmares and everything else. Any other questions? Yes?
Once you got this all settled, is the government cool with you going around and telling everybody your story?
Well,
and
that's the problem. The guy there that made that statement, when I actually got the settlement, there was a veiled warning that they weren't going to answer any of my other questions. They were going to treat me for what I had and to move on with my life, which I wanted to. But this group, led by him, didn't want that to be that way. They wanted to utilize me to help them gain whatever they're trying to get behind closed doors. Because there's another thing that went on. Right after I got my settlement, anybody aware, 2017, one of the things that happened after that article came out, Senator McCain was still alive. He held hearings on what the article was about and what was known. And they're called DIRDS papers, D-I-R-D-S. You can look up online. There were 38 of them. It all goes back to him and a bunch of other people that were involved in this exotic technology. And he held hearings because he knew a little bit about what happened with me. And he wanted to know where all this information was coming from. Well, unfortunately, after he did that, some of these documents got declassified and made public, but he got cancer and died. So it kind of died right there. He really was interested in it based on what he learned about what happened with me. okay? But these guys won't let it alone. So in essence, I come out and talk a little bit about it, trying to tell you what I feel happened to me, what's going on now, the narrative they're trying to drive. They're doing things like DNA, and there's people out there that may be different. You know, they were doing a study on DNA and the mind, and they're trying to rewrite history. Now, I'm saying they're wrong, but they're trying to rewrite a lot of things about what God means and all this other stuff, what certain people that may have had these encounters, what it means and all that stuff. And I just go out there and try to, since they're going to keep it in the limelight. You can see me all over. I've been on, anybody heard of Russ Calkart? They talk about me at least once a month on News Nation, either in his interviews and all that. They're constantly talking about me, my encounters, my DNA and everything else. So yes, I would have preferred to just go away, but certain people didn't want to let that happen. So they haven't warned me not to talk anymore. No, but I'm not saying it'll never happen, but ultimately, it's really hard to blame me when these guys are the ones talking. That was the other thing. I was asked to go and testify in front of Congress. I was asked to go up to meet the Aero Committee, the Gang of Eight, and I refused all that. Because what I asked them to do before I went up there was go to the VA and have them clarify where my records stand, my injuries, what they know. Are my records still classified and everything else? And everybody I've confronted to do this inside government hasn't done it. So therefore, I have no intentions of saying anything more up there, because that would cause a problem. If I go up there, the guy that was with me go up there, and that gets in the news where, oh, here's the real people. Oops, yes, we believe it's real. That would cause a bigger problem than what's going on right now. Yes?
Have you had any other weird experiences, like when you were living in Sedona?
Yeah, I told you about that. There's 2 times I've had weird experiences. I lived in Sedona for 2 years. Anybody heard of Bradshaw Ranch? It's kind of like Skinwalker. You can look up online. It sits out in the west end of Sedona. The government seized it for a while. There was some weird stuff going on out there, just like up at Skinwalker. And I went out there a couple different times, and there was stuff flying around out there when I was out there. And then we made a visit, it'll be 2 years ago in October, to Skinwalker, and the night we went out there on the ranch, stuff was flying around everywhere. So I've had weird stuff happen since, as far as when I show up in an area where there's no activity, there's stuff in the sky. Yeah?
John, just your own personal opinion.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Black Pyramids?
No.
Okay. That's all I need.
Okay. Any other questions?
How about the men in black? They ever show up?
He's one of them.
Oh.
They are. This whole thing about the Men in Black's fun to watch on TV, but there are people inside government that are involved in all this and working on this technology and stuff. So it's not like some guys show up, you know. If you ask me if I've ever been directly threatened, the closest thing was when they settle with me, they say, just go away. That's basically what they're telling me. Leave it alone, we're not going to tell you anymore. We're done with you. We'll take care of you because of the people behind you that caused the rift. But the bottom line is, these people then, like, well, we helped save you, now you belong to us. But are they real problems? Yeah, I would say they are, probably. But they're in a different way. If something weird happens, they're going to show up and investigate it. And they're going to affect the outcome of what people saw out there. Yeah.
So, based on your experiences and then like what's come to light more recently in the news and everything, like in your opinion, do you think these visitors, wherever, do you think they're all coming from the same place, or do you think it's lots of different places that are all?
Well, that's the whole thing with ufology. It's just like politics, okay? Everybody's got their own opinion on what it means, what documents have been circulated, people have seen. What I can tell you based on my experiences, there is a life form here. It's probably among us, but I don't know if it's biological or not. I think it's more of an energy-based life form, okay? It could be something that we evolve to eventually, because we're supposed to continue to evolve. All different cultures all along the way have said they've seen things in evolution take place. That's where you get into the religious problem. Have we been told the truth about a religion? You know, how we actually came to evolve, how we're here. And that's real. I believe it would cause a rift if something came out, whether it's truthful or not. It would just take certain people to really come forward, that people believe, to start talking things about how we became to exist, who came here and planted the seed and all that other stuff. never mind God itself, you know, or the creator, whatever you want to call him. So I do believe there's an intelligence among us. It doesn't mean it's biological. And especially that's what we encountered, and they're studying it to weaponize it. Any other question? Yeah.
Do you have any memories from when you were hit by the light and taken?
No, actually, that was the thing. Both times I got close to it, I don't remember what happened until afterwards. Did go under hypnosis. You can see a clip of it online on YouTube. It's from 1988. And within it, I say that the actual, besides the encounter, we talk a little bit about the encounter, but I don't really go into what happened when when I got close to it. But it does talk about how in my hypnosis, I talk about how what I encountered was the life form.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you. And one other thing, I hope you continue to keep track of this, because if you go back, and this is not really totally conspiracy based, it's been made public, there's different things that were supposed to happen to us to be able to control us. And von Braun said eventually the threat from above will be something the governments will use to control society. So if you're really interested in this, follow it. It's hard to figure out what's true and what's not, but at least keep track of it, because eventually they could turn it on us. They could use it to somehow change everything, just like after 9/11 did with the Patriot Act and everything else. Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah.